I raised my daughter as a single father. On her wedding day, she didn't invite me. Even so, she called me. We already got married, send the keys to the house in Orlando, and stopped being so dramatic. I hung up 4 days later. My gift made her husband faint. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I raised my daughter as a single father. On her wedding day, she didn't invite me. Even so, she called me. We're already married. Send the keys to the house in Orlando and stop being dramatic. I hung up. 4 days later, my gift made her husband faint. The phone rang at 4:15 p.m. on a Wednesday. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my watch counting down the minutes until Emily's wedding ceremony was supposed to begin. The ceremony, I wasn't invited to the ceremony I'd found out about through a social media post from her college friend Dad. Her voice came through the speaker with that familiar tone, the one she'd used since she was 14 whenever she wanted something from me. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. 22 years of raising her alone. And this was how I found out my only child had gotten married through social media, like I was some distant acquaintance, Emily. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. How was the wedding? She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, it was perfect. Victor has such wonderful taste. The venue was incredible. This historic plantation house with Spanish moss everywhere. Very romantic. I closed my eyes, picturing it. I dreamed of walking her down the aisle since the day she was born. I'd imagined giving a father of the bride speech, dancing with her to You Are My Sunshine like we used to when she was little. That sounds lovely, I managed to say. Listen, Dad, I'm calling because Victor and I need the Orlando house keys. We're flying down there for our honeymoon tomorrow morning. Can you courier them today? We don't have time for delays. The Orlando house. Our Orlando house. The one I'd bought when Emily was 10, thinking it would be our special place. The one where we'd spend every spring break and summer vacation. Where I'd taught her to swim in the pool. Where we'd watched sunsets from the deck. Where she'd brought her high school boyfriends to impress them. Emily, sweetheart. We should probably talk about this in person. Why don't you and Victor come over for dinner this weekend? I'd love to meet him properly. Dad, stop being dramatic. We're married now. I'm an adult. Just send the keys and stop making everything so complicated. Stop being dramatic. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dramatic for wanting to meet my son-in-law. Dramatic for feeling hurt that my only child had excluded me from the most important day of her life. Emily, I just want to understand what happened. We talked 4 months ago and you mentioned planning an engagement party. You never said you were getting married so soon, and you certainly never mentioned that I wouldn't be. God, Dad, you're exhausting. Look, Victor doesn't really do the whole big family thing. His parents are dead, and he thought it would be weird to have this huge celebration with just your side. So we kept it small, intimate, just us and a few close friends. Just us and a few close friends, not family, not the man who'd sacrificed everything to raise her. I thought back to when Emily was 3 and her mother walked out on us. Susan had left a note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. I'm not cut out to be a mother. Take care of Emily. Don't look for me. I'd found Emily that morning sitting at the breakfast table in her Blue's Clues pajamas, asking where Mommy was. I'd knelt down beside her chair and promised her that no matter what, I would always be there for her. Always. I kept that promise. I turned down job promotions that would have required travel. I sold my classic Corvette to pay for her dance lessons. I learned to braid hair and paint tiny fingernails. I sat through every school play, every soccer game, every piano recital, even when I was exhausted from working extra shifts to afford her private school tuition. Emily, I said quietly, you're my daughter, my only family. How could you think I wouldn't want to be there because you always make everything about you, Dad? Always. This was supposed to be my day, and you would have found some way to make it stressful. Victor could see that he was protecting me from your intensity. My intensity. Is that what she called 22 years of unconditional love? Intensity. I don't understand where this is coming from. I thought we had a good relationship. We do, Dad. But I'm starting my own family now. Victor and I need space to figure things out without you hovering all the time. Speaking of which, we really do need those keys. Victor has meetings in Orlando next week, and we want to extend the honeymoon. Victor has meetings in my house. The house I'd worked 12-hour days to afford, thinking it would be Emily's inheritance someday. The house where I'd planned to retire and maybe finally have those grandchildren visit for Christmas morning. Emily, the house isn't just a vacation rental. It's our family home. It has sentimental value. Dad, seriously stop being so possessive. It's just a house, and technically I'm your heir anyway, so it'll be mine eventually. Why can't I use it now when I actually need it? Just a house. Eventually mine anyway. The casual entitlement in her voice was like listening to a stranger. When had my sweet little girl become this cold, calculating person? I remembered the day I'd carried her on my shoulders through the Orlando house when we first bought it. She was 10, and she'd squeal with delight at the pool, begging me to let her skip school. The next day, so we could swim. I'd said yes, and we'd spent hours in the water playing tag and racing from one end to the other. Emily, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Do you love this man? Of course I love him, Dad. Why would you even ask that? Because 4 months ago you were dating someone named Tom, a law student, I think, and now you're married to someone I've never even heard of. There was a pause. A long one. People change their minds, Dad. Relationships evolve. Victor swept me off my feet. He's sophisticated, successful, mature. He knows what he wants. And what does he want? A wife who's independent, who doesn't need her daddy holding her hand through every decision. The words stung because they weren't true. I hadn't held her hand through decisions. I'd simply been available when she needed me. There's a difference. Emily, I'm your father. I love you. I just want to make sure you're happy and safe. I am happy. Happier than I've ever been, and I'd be even happier if you could just send those keys without making it into this big emotional thing. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden. Emily had helped me plant those roses when she was 12, complaining the whole time that it was boring. But later she'd brought friends over just to show off the flowers, proudly telling them she'd helped choose the colors. Where was that girl now? The one who used to curl up next to me on the couch to watch old movies. The one who called me her best friend when she was in high school. Dad, are you still there? I'm here, so you'll send the keys. I took a deep breath. Something in my gut was telling me this was wrong, all of it. The rushed marriage, the husband I'd never met, the sudden demand for access to valuable property. But I also knew that if I said no, Emily would probably cut me out of her life entirely. I'll think about it. There's nothing to think about, Dad. Just send the keys. Emily, I said I'll think about it. The line went quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Colder, more deliberate. Fine, but don't take too long. Victor isn't a patient man. The call ended, leaving me standing there with the phone in my hand, staring at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time in 22 years, I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to understand how my relationship with my daughter had deteriorated so completely without my noticing. Or maybe I had noticed but hadn't wanted to see it. I got up and walked to Emily's old room, which I'd kept exactly as she'd left it when she moved out for college. Her high school awards were still on the wall. Her stuffed animals were arranged on the bed. Photos of us together covered her dresser, camping trips, birthday parties, graduation day. In every single photo I was smiling, proud, happy to be her father. In most of them, Emily was smiling too. But looking at them now, I wondered if I had been seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was actually there. My phone buzzed with a text message. Dad? Victor says if you don't send the keys by tomorrow, we'll just find another place for the honeymoon. Your choice. I stared at the message until the screen went dark and I realized something that chilled me to the bone. I didn't know my daughter at all, and I was starting to suspect she didn't love me the way I'd always believed she did. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I couldn't stop thinking about Emily's words. Victor isn't a patient man. What kind of threat was that supposed to be? And why was my daughter delivering it? I spent the morning walking through the house looking at everything with new eyes. The piano in the living room. I'd bought it when Emily was 5 because she'd mentioned wanting to learn. I'd worked overtime for 5 months to afford those lessons. The built-in bookshelves were filled with every book she'd ever loved, from The Very Hungry Caterpillar to her college literature textbooks that I'd helped her buy. Every corner of this house told the story of my devotion to my daughter. But apparently that devotion had become intensity and hovering. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Dr. Lopez's number. Maria had been Emily's pediatrician when she was young, and over the years she'd become something of a friend. She'd seen me through every milestone, every crisis, every moment of single-parent panic. Thomas Maria answered on the second ring. "What a nice surprise. How's Emily doing?" "She got married yesterday." There was a pause. "Congratulations." "That's wonderful news. You must be so proud." "How was the wedding? I wasn't invited." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm sorry." What I told her everything. The phone call. The demand for the Orlando house keys. The casual cruelty of being excluded from my own daughter's wedding. Maria listened without interrupting, making those small, sympathetic sounds that doctors learn to make when someone is in pain. "Thomas," she said finally, "I have to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Looking back over the past few years, have there been other signs that Emily was pulling away?" I wanted to say no immediately, but as I thought about it, images started flooding back. Emily, at 19, asking for money to study abroad in Spain, then barely calling while she was there. When she did call, she was always rushing to get off the phone, always had somewhere else to be. Emily at 21, graduating from college and moving to Chicago without discussing it with me first. "I need to be independent, Dad." "You understand, right, Emily? At 23, dating that investment banker who never wanted to visit California. He's just not a beach person, Dad. Maybe you could come up here instead." But whenever I suggested visiting, she was always busy with work events or friends' parties. Maybe I admitted to Maria, but I thought she was just growing up becoming her own person. That's normal. But completely excluding you from her wedding, that's not normal, Thomas. That's concerning. I walked into Emily's old room and sat on her bed, surrounded by all those photos and memories. "Maria, I keep wondering if I spoiled her if I gave her too much." "Tell me what you mean." So I told her about selling my business when Emily was 14 because she'd gotten into an expensive private boarding school and claimed it was her dream school. About the credit cards I'd given her in college with no spending limits because I wanted her to focus on her studies, not worry about money. About the Mercedes I'd bought her for her 19th birthday because she'd mentioned how embarrassed she was to drive her old Toyota, Thomas Maria said gently. "You gave her everything she wanted." "I gave her everything I never had." I corrected. "My parents were distant cold. I swore I'd never make my child feel unloved or unsupported. But there's a difference between being supportive and being an enabler." The word hit me like a slap. Enabler. I thought about the time Emily was 17 and called me crying because she'd failed a midterm. Instead of encouraging her to talk to her professor or study harder, I'd called the school and donated money for a new computer lab. Suddenly, Emily's grade had been reviewed and raised to a passing score. I thought about when she was 20 and got fired from her first internship for showing up late repeatedly. Instead of letting her face the consequences, I'd called in a favor with a business contact and gotten her a better position at a different company. I thought about last year when she'd called panicking about credit card debt. She'd run up nearly $25,000 in charges on vacation trips and shopping sprees. Instead of making her figure out a payment plan or get a second job, I'd simply paid it off. "Oh God," I whispered into the phone. "I created this, didn't I?" "You created a young woman who's never had to face real consequences for her actions," Maria said carefully. "And now she's married to a man you've never met, demanding access to valuable property and treating you like an inconvenience. What do I do?" "First, you don't send those keys. Not until you meet this Victor and get a sense of who he is. Second, you might want to do some research on him." Research Thomas Emily went from dating a law student 4 months ago to marrying a complete stranger. That's not normal behavior. And if this Victor is as sophisticated and successful as she claims, why does he need to use your Orlando house for business meetings? After we hung up, I sat in Emily's room for a long time looking at all those photos differently. In the recent ones, the ones from her college years and after, I noticed something I'd missed before. Emily's smiles looked forced, practiced like she was performing for the camera rather than genuinely happy. And in every photo where she was receiving a gift or celebrating an achievement I'd made possible, there was something else in her eyes. not gratitude expectation as if she'd come to view my sacrifices as her due. I walked downstairs to my home office and opened my laptop. If Maria was right, if something was wrong with this sudden marriage, then I needed to know what I was dealing with. I started with social media. Emily's social media page showed photos from what was apparently a small ceremony at some upscale venue. She looked beautiful in a simple white dress standing next to a man in his 45s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. Victor, I assumed he was older than I'd expected. Much older. Emily was 26. This man looked like he was pushing 55. Not that age gaps were automatically problematic, but combined with everything else, it raised more questions. I studied his face trying to get a read on him. He had the kind of polished appearance that came with money. Perfect teeth, professional haircut, designer clothes. But something about his smile bothered me. It didn't reach his eyes. I clicked on his profile. Victor Blackwell listed as entrepreneur and investor. No specific companies mentioned, no work history, no family photos, just pictures of expensive cars, luxury vacation destinations, and high-end restaurants. The kind of social media presence designed to impress rather than inform. I tried searching for him on search engine. A few business articles mentioned his name in passing, but nothing substantial. No detailed biography, no company website, no professional achievements worth documenting. For someone Emily described as sophisticated and successful, he had surprisingly little digital footprint. That bothered me. I called my attorney, Robert Hayes. Robert had handled my business sale and various legal matters over the years. He was also a father of daughters and would understand my concerns. Robert, I need you to run a background check on someone. Sure, Thomas. What's going on? I explained the situation. The sudden marriage, the demand for property access. My growing unease about this Victor character. You're right to be cautious. Robert said, I've seen this before. Older men who prey on young women from wealthy families. They move fast to avoid scrutiny and immediately start pushing for access to assets. You think that's what this is? I think you should find out before you hand over keys to a multi-million-dollar property. Robert promised to have information within 36 hours. In the meantime, he advised me not to give Emily or Victor access to anything until we knew more. That afternoon, Emily called again. Dad, where are the keys? I told you we needed them today. Emily, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I'd really like to meet Victor before. Oh my God, Dad, what is wrong with you? We're married. You don't get to interview my husband like I'm still 14. I'm not trying to interview anyone. I just think it's normal for families to meet each other, especially before sharing property. Families meet each other before the wedding, Dad. But you made it very clear over the years that you weren't interested in being part of my adult life. I made it clear, Emily. How did I make that clear? By being so controlling, by questioning every decision I made, by making my boyfriends feel uncomfortable with your constant hovering. I tried to remember making any boyfriend uncomfortable. The law student, she'd mentioned Tom. I'd met him exactly once at a graduation dinner. I'd asked him about his career plans and wished him luck on his bar exam. That was controlling. Emily, I don't remember being controlling. I remember being interested in your life. Same thing, Dad. Look, Victor says this is exactly the kind of behavior he was trying to protect me from. He says some fathers can't let go of their daughters and it becomes unhealthy. Victor says, how convenient that this man I'd never met was already an expert on my relationship with my daughter. What else does Victor say about me? He says, you probably mean well, but that I need to set boundaries if I want to have a healthy marriage. Set boundaries with the man who'd raised her alone for 22 years. Emily, I want you to be happy. If setting boundaries is what you need, we can discuss that. But completely cutting me out of major life events isn't setting boundaries. It's cutting ties. Nobody cut you out, Dad. We just didn't want the stress of a big wedding. Victor has been married before, and he said they're usually more trouble than they're worth. Victor had been married before. Another piece of information Emily had failed to mention. How many times has he been married? I don't know, Dad. A couple times. Who cares? His previous marriages didn't work out. But ours will be different. What happened to his previous wives? God, Dad, you're being creepy now. They got divorced like half of all married couples. It's not some big conspiracy, but something in her voice suggested she didn't know the details either. And that worried me more than anything else. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. My daughter had married a man she barely knew, and now she was pairing his opinions about me and our relationship. She was demanding access to valuable property for a honeymoon that was apparently doubling as business meetings. Maria was right. None of this was normal. I just had to hope Robert would find something that would help me understand what I was really dealing with, because my gut was telling me that Emily wasn't just pulling away from me. She was in danger, and she was too blind to see it. Robert called me at 7:00 a.m., one day earlier than promised. I could hear the tension in his voice before he even said hello. Thomas, we need to talk in person. Can you come to my office this morning? You found something. I found a lot of things, none of them good. I was dressed and in my car within 20 minutes. Robert's office was downtown in one of those glass towers that made you feel small just walking into the lobby. I'd been there many times over the years for business matters, but I'd never felt this sick to my stomach walking through those polished doors. Robert was waiting for me with a thick manila folder and a pot of coffee that looked like it had been brewing all night. His usually impeccable suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. This was not the composed attorney I knew. Sit down, Thomas, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. He opened the folder and spread several documents across his desk. Police reports, newspaper clippings, court filings, death certificates. My blood ran cold just looking at them. Victor Blackwell has been married 4 times in the past 15 years, Robert began. Not twice like Emily thinks, 4 times, divorced 4 times. Robert's expression darkened. 3 divorces, 1 death. The room seemed to tilt around me. Death. His second wife, Elizabeth Blackwell, died in a car accident 5 months after their wedding. Single car crash on a mountain road in Utah. Very convenient timing, considering she just inherited a substantial sum from her grandmother. I stared at the death certificate, the official language making something horrific sound routine. I think Victor Blackwell has a pattern, Robert interrupted. And your daughter fits it perfectly. He laid out 3 more files. Wife number 1. Sarah Thompson, married in 2010, divorced in 2011 after she discovered he'd taken out credit cards in her name and maxed them out. She was left with $70,000 in debt and a ruined credit score. Wife number 3. Lisa Wong, married in 2016, divorced in 2018, but not before Victor convinced her to sell her late father's restaurant and invest the proceeds in one of his business ventures. The money disappeared. Lisa lost everything and had to move back in with her elderly mother. And wife number 4, Maria Gonzalez, married in 2020. She owned a successful boutique hotel in Palm Beach. During their 16-month marriage, Victor gradually took over the business operations. When Maria filed for divorce, she discovered he'd been embezzling from the hotel accounts and had mortgaged the property without her knowledge. She lost the hotel and is currently working as a hotel manager for someone else. I felt sick. All of them had money. All of them had assets Victor could access. Robert confirmed, and all of them were isolated from their families during the marriage. He's very good at convincing women that their relatives are toxic, controlling, jealous of their happiness. The words hit me like physical blows. Emily's sudden coldness, her accusations that I was controlling and hovering, her adoption of Victor's opinions about me and our relationship. It was all part of a script he'd used before. There's more, Robert continued grimly. I had my investigator dig deeper into Elizabeth's accident. He pulled out another report. This one marked Private Investigation Confidential. Elizabeth had called her sister 4 days before she died. She was scared. She said Victor had been pressuring her to change her will to make him the sole beneficiary. She was planning to leave him, but she was afraid of what he might do. And then she died in a convenient accident. The police investigated, but they couldn't prove anything. Victor had an alibi. He was supposedly in Salt Lake City on business. But my investigator found something interesting. The GPS in Elizabeth's car showed she'd been to Salt Lake City that day too. She was following him, trying to catch him in a lie about where he was. She was driving back alone on a road she'd never traveled before. In a car that Victor had recently had serviced, the brake lines weren't cut. That would be too obvious. But the brake fluid was old. The lines were corroded in exactly the right places. An accident waiting to happen. I stared at the photographs of twisted metal and broken glass, trying not to imagine Emily in a similar situation. Robert, what do I do if I show Emily this information? She'll just think I'm trying to sabotage her marriage. She's already convinced I'm jealous and controlling. That's exactly what he wants her to think. Robert said, "This isolation technique is textbook predatory behavior. He's already rewritten the history of your relationship in her mind, made her believe you're the problem. I thought about Emily's phone calls, how she'd started pairing Victor's opinions about me, how she'd suddenly remembered our relationship as suffocating and unhealthy, when just 5 months ago she'd called me on Father's Day to tell me I was the best dad ever. What about the Orlando house? Should I give them the keys?" Robert's expression turned deadly serious. "Thomas, under no circumstances should you give this man access to that property. Based on his pattern, I believe he married Emily specifically because he knew about her inheritance potential. The Orlando house is worth, what, $2 million, 4.2, according to the last appraisal. He's going to try to get Emily to sign papers giving him access to your assets. Maybe a power of attorney, maybe something that makes him a beneficiary if anything happens to you. And once he has legal access, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to." I walked to Robert's window and looked down at the city below. Somewhere out there, my daughter was on her honeymoon with a man who might have killed his previous wife. She thought she was living in a fairy tale, but she was actually trapped in a horror story. "There's something else," Robert said quietly. I had my investigator look into how Victor met Emily. It wasn't a coincidence. He showed me another document, credit card records, and social media data. Victor has been following Emily's social media for over a year. He knew where she worked, where she went to happy hour with friends, which gym she used. 4 months ago, he engineered a chance meeting at that new wine bar she posted about constantly. He stalked her. He researched her like a predator selecting prey. Emily posts about her lifestyle, her family, her inheritance expectations. She might as well have worn a sign saying, "Wealthy daddy will inherit millions." The full scope of the manipulation hit me like a freight train. This wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a calculated attack on my daughter and my family's assets. And Emily was so completely under his influence that she couldn't see it. I sat back down. My legs suddenly unsteady. "Robert, what happens if I refuse to give him the keys and Emily chooses him over me?" "Then you document everything. You make sure your will is ironclad with provisions that protect your assets from any current or future spouses Emily might have. And you hope that eventually she sees through him before it's too late. And if she doesn't," Robert's expression was grim, "then you hope she's luckier than Elizabeth Blackwell." I spent the rest of the morning in Robert's office, going through every document, memorizing every detail of Victor's history. By the time I left, I had copies of everything: police reports, financial records, witness statements from his previous wives. The evidence was overwhelming. Victor Blackwell was a professional predator who targeted women with money, isolated them from their families, gained access to their assets, and then discarded them. In Elizabeth's case, he might have done much worse than discard her. But proving it to Emily would be nearly impossible. She was so completely convinced that I was the problem in our relationship that she'd probably see my evidence as fabricated jealousy. I drove home slowly, trying to figure out my next move. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. "Emily." "Dad, I'm getting really tired of this game. Victor is furious that you're making us wait for the keys. He says it's disrespectful to our marriage." "Emily, there's something I need to tell you about Victor." "Oh God, here we go. Dad, whatever gossip you've dug up, I don't want to hear it. This isn't gossip. It's documented facts about his previous marriages." "I know about his previous marriages. He was honest with me about his past relationships." "Did he tell you that one of his wives died under suspicious circumstances?" There was silence on the line. Emily: "Dad, you're scaring me. Not because of what you're saying about Victor, but because of how obsessed you've become." Emily: Please just listen to me for 10 minutes. No, I'm done listening to you tear down my husband. Victor was right about you. He said you'd try to sabotage our marriage because you can't stand that I don't need you anymore. Victor was right about me again. How perfectly he'd predicted my response prepared her for my concerns, made sure she'd dismiss anything I said as pathological jealousy. Emily, I love you. I just want you to be safe. I am safe. I'm safer and happier than I've ever been, and I'd be even safer if you'd stop harassing us with these paranoid conspiracy theories. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car in my own driveway holding my phone, feeling more helpless than I'd ever felt in my life. My daughter was married to a man who had possibly killed his previous wife, and she was so thoroughly manipulated that she saw my attempts to protect her as attacks on her happiness. For 22 years, I'd protected Emily from everything: poverty, abandonment, disappointment, consequence. I'd created a perfect bubble around her where she never had to face any real danger or hardship. But I couldn't protect her from this. The very sheltering that I'd thought was love had made her vulnerable to exactly this kind of predator. She had no experience recognizing danger because I'd never let her face any. And now the biggest threat she'd ever encountered had convinced her that I was the real enemy. My phone buzzed with a text message. Dad, Victor, and I have decided to book a different place for our honeymoon since you're being so difficult about the house. But this isn't over. We'll be back from our trip in 1 week, and we're going to have a serious conversation about boundaries. I stared at the message, and something cold settled in my chest. Victor hadn't given up on the Orlando house. He was just regrouping, planning a different approach. In 1 week they'd be back, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. Because looking at all of Robert's evidence, one thing was absolutely clear. Victor Blackwell didn't take no for an answer. And people who got in his way had a tendency to disappear. 1 week. I had 1 week to figure out how to save my daughter from a man who had possibly murdered his previous wife. I spent those 10 days learning everything I could about Victor Blackwell. I hired a second private investigator to verify Robert's findings and dig deeper. I contacted the sister of Elizabeth Blackwell, the wife who died in that convenient car accident. I even reached out to Sarah, Lisa, and Maria, the 3 ex-wives who'd survived their marriages to Victor. What I learned made me sick to my stomach. Sarah Thompson agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Boston, where she now worked as a kindergarten teacher. She was a small woman in her 30s with nervous hands and the kind of jumpiness that comes from lasting trauma. He was so charming at first, she told me, stirring her coffee with shaking fingers. Attentive, romantic, everything I thought I wanted in a husband. But the moment we got back from our honeymoon, everything changed. How he started isolating me from my family. My parents were negative influences. My sister was jealous of our happiness. My friends were trying to sabotage our marriage. Within 5 months, I was completely cut off from everyone who cared about me. And then he started stealing from you. Sarah nodded. Credit cards in my name, loans against my car, even forging my signature on checks. When I confronted him, he convinced me it was my fault for not trusting him. He was so good at making me doubt my own reality. How did you get out? My sister showed up at my door one day when Victor was at work. She literally dragged me to a lawyer and helped me file for divorce. Even then, Victor tried to make me believe I was making a mistake, that I'd never find anyone who loved me the way he did. Sarah looked at me with haunted eyes. The scariest part wasn't the money he stole. It was how completely he controlled my thoughts. By the end, I couldn't make a decision without his approval. I didn't know who I was anymore. I left that meeting feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything Sarah described sounded exactly like what was happening to Emily. The isolation, the rewriting of family relationships, the total psychological control. Lisa Wong was harder to track down, but I finally reached her by phone. Her story was even worse. Victor convinced me to sell my father's restaurant, she told me, her voice still bitter years later. It had been in our family for 30 years. My father built it from nothing, and it was his dream to pass it down to me. Why did you sell it? Because Victor made me believe it was holding me back. He said I'd never be truly successful as long as I was tied to my family's old-fashioned expectations. He had this business plan, this amazing investment opportunity that would make us millionaires. What happened to the money? Lisa's laugh was hollow. Gone. All of it. The business never existed. Victor had created fake documents, fake partners, fake everything. By the time I realized what had happened, he disappeared with every penny and your family. My father died a year later. The restaurant was his whole life, and losing it broke his heart. He never forgave me for selling it to a con man. My mother barely speaks to me now. The conversation with Maria Gonzalez was the most chilling of all. She'd owned a boutique hotel in Palm Beach, a successful business she'd built over 15 years. Victor had systematically destroyed it. He was so supportive at first, Maria explained during our video call. He said he wanted to help me take the business to the next level. I was touched that someone believed in my dreams. When did things change? Gradually, he started questioning my business decisions, suggesting I wasn't qualified to handle certain aspects of hotel management. He volunteered to take over the financial side while I focused on guest services. And you agreed I trusted him. He was my husband, and he made it sound so logical. Why stress myself with bookkeeping when he had business experience? How long before you realized what was happening? Maria's voice turned cold. 16 months, I started getting calls from suppliers about unpaid bills. When I asked Victor about it, he said there were temporary cash flow issues that he was handling it. But the calls kept coming, so you investigated. I hired a forensic accountant. Victor had been embezzling from the hotel accounts for over a year. He'd also mortgaged the property without my knowledge. Using forged signatures, I lost everything. The hotel, my savings, my credit. I'm 40 years old and living in a one-bedroom apartment working for someone else. Did you press charges? I tried. But Victor was smart. He'd created a paper trail that made it look like I'd authorized everything. His lawyer argued that it was a marital dispute, not criminal fraud. The DA didn't pursue it. After talking to all three women, the pattern was crystal clear. Victor was a sophisticated predator who specialized in psychological manipulation and financial fraud. He targeted successful women with assets, isolated them from their support systems, gained control of their finances, and then systematically destroyed their lives. And now he had his sights set on Emily and our family's wealth. The question was, how could I expose him without driving Emily further into his arms? I spent hours discussing strategy with Robert. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. Emily was too thoroughly manipulated to believe anything negative about Victor. Legal action was premature. Victor hadn't actually committed any crimes against our family yet. Going to the police would be pointless. They couldn't arrest someone for having a suspicious past. But then I had an idea. What if I don't try to convince Emily at all? I asked Robert during one of our strategy sessions. What do you mean? What if I target Victor directly? Force him to reveal his true nature? Robert raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous, Thomas. Maybe. But think about it. Victor's whole strategy depends on control. He controls the narrative controls. Emily's perceptions controls the flow of information. What if I disrupted that control? How I smiled, and I could see Robert getting nervous at my expression. I'm going to give them a wedding present. The idea came to me while I was looking through all the evidence Robert had compiled. Police reports, financial records, witness statements. Court filings, a complete documentation of Victor's criminal history. Instead of trying to convince Emily, what if I put this information directly in Victor's hands? I spent 4 days preparing the perfect package. I had a professional document service create a bound presentation with Victor Blackwell's photograph on the cover and the title, A Complete History. Inside were copies of every piece of evidence Robert had gathered, organized chronologically, and cross-referenced police reports from Elizabeth's suspicious death, financial records showing his theft from Sarah Lisa, and Maria court documents from their divorce proceedings, statements from witnesses who could testify to his pattern of abuse and manipulation. But the centerpiece was something I'd obtained through my second private investigator. Surveillance photographs of Victor with other women during his marriage to Maria. Not just one affair, but multiple relationships he'd maintained simultaneously. The photos were recent enough to overlap with his courtship of Emily. I also included a detailed timeline showing how Victor had stalked Emily on social media before orchestrating their chance meeting, screenshots of his searches records of his visits to locations she'd posted about evidence that their entire relationship had been premeditated. The final section was the most damning, a psychological profile prepared by Dr. Emily Carter, a forensic psychologist who specialized in predatory behavior. Based on Victor's history, she'd identified him as a classic psychopathic manipulator with narcissistic and antisocial tendencies. Mr. Blackwell exhibits a clear pattern of targeting vulnerable women for financial exploitation, Dr. Carter had written. His methods include isolation from family support systems, gradual assumption of financial control, and systematic psychological abuse designed to create dependency. Given his history, any current or future romantic partners should be considered at risk for emotional, financial, and potentially physical harm. I had the entire package professionally bound in elegant leather with gold lettering. It looked like a wedding album or anniversary gift, something expensive and meaningful. On the morning Emily and Victor were scheduled to return from their honeymoon, I had the package delivered to their hotel room with a card that read, "For Victor, welcome to the family. I thought you should know that I know exactly who you are, Thomas." Then I waited. The call came 5 hours later, not from Emily, but from Victor himself. "Thomas." His voice was calm, controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. "I received your gift. Did you enjoy it?" "It's very thorough. You've obviously invested considerable time and money in this research. I wanted to be accurate." There was a pause. "What exactly do you want?" "I want you to leave my daughter alone." Victor chuckled, and the sound made my skin crawl. "I'm afraid that's not possible. Emily and I are married. We're in love. We're building a life together." "No, Victor. You're executing a plan to steal her inheritance and destroy her life just like you did to Elizabeth, Sarah, Lisa, and Maria." Another pause, longer this time. "You know," Victor said finally, "Emily warned me that you were obsessive, but I didn't realize you were actually delusional." "I'm not delusional. I'm informed. These are old stories, Thomas. Ancient history. People make mistakes. Relationships end. Accidents happen. None of it has anything to do with my marriage to Emily. Elizabeth's death wasn't an accident. Elizabeth died in a car crash. The police investigated thoroughly and found no evidence of foul play." "Because you're smart, you know how to make murder look like an accident." Victor's voice turned ice cold. "Be very careful about what you accuse me of, Thomas. Slander is a serious crime. So is fraud and theft and murder. I think this conversation is over." "No, Victor. This conversation is just beginning because here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Emily the truth about who you are, and you're going to leave our family alone. Or I'm going to make sure that every detail of your criminal history becomes public knowledge." Victor laughed, genuinely amused. "You think you can threaten me, Thomas? You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who preys on women and runs when he gets caught. I don't run from anything, and I certainly don't run from pathetic old men who can't accept that their daughters have grown up. We'll see about that." I hung up before he could respond. 4 hours later, Emily called. She was crying. "Dad, what did you do? I sent Victor some information. I thought he should see. He's furious. I've never seen him like this. He's talking about filing a restraining order against you." "Emily, where are you right now?" "We're at the hotel. Victor went for a walk to cool down." "Dad, what was in that package?" For a moment I thought she might actually be ready to hear the truth, but then I heard footsteps in the background and her voice changed. "Never mind. I don't want to know. Victor is back. Dad, you need to stop this. Whatever game you're playing, it needs to end now." "Emily, I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you to respect my marriage and stop trying to sabotage my happiness." The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Had I just pushed Emily further into Victor control? Had I given him ammunition to use against me? But then I thought about Elizabeth Blackwell, dead at 27 in a convenient car accident. I thought about Sarah, Lisa, and Maria. Their lives destroyed by a man who specialized in psychological manipulation and financial theft. I couldn't let that happen to Emily no matter what it cost me. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Game on, old man. Let's see how this plays out." "V." I smiled grimly and typed back, "I'm ready when you are." But even as I sent the message, I couldn't shake the feeling that I just declared war on a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And somewhere in that hotel room, my daughter was trapped in the middle of a battle she didn't even know was being fought. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. Victor had gone silent after our confrontation, which worried me more than his threats had. In my experience, dangerous people are most lethal when they're quiet planning their next move. Emily called once, her voice strained and distant. Dad, Victor and I are extending our honeymoon. We need some time to process everything that's happened. Emily, where are you staying? I can't tell you that. Victor says you might try to find us, and we need space right now. The fear in her voice broke my heart. My daughter was afraid of me, the man who'd spent 22 years protecting her from every possible harm. Sweetheart, I would never hurt you. You know that, right? I don't know what I know anymore, Dad. Victor showed me some of the things you wrote about him, the accusations you made. It's scary how obsessed you've become. I could hear Victor coaching her in the background, his voice too low to make out words, but clear enough to recognize the manipulative tone. Emily, please just listen to me for 1 minute. That man is dangerous. I have proof. Stop. Her voice cracked with emotion. I can't do this anymore. Victor was right. You're trying to destroy my marriage because you can't stand that I chose someone over you. That's not true, isn't it? You've spent my whole life making sure I depended on you for everything. And now that I found someone who actually loves me for who I am, not what I can give them, you can't handle it. The irony was devastating. Victor had convinced her that I was the manipulative one, that I was the one who'd spent years controlling her. He'd taken every sacrifice I'd made out of love and reframed it as selfish control. Emily, I love you. Everything I've done has been because I love you. Then let me go, Dad. Let me be happy. The line went dead, and I knew I might never hear from my daughter again. But on the 4th day, everything changed. I was in my home office staring at my computer screen and trying to figure out my next move when my phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Thomas Patterson? Yes. My name is Detective Karen Johnson with the Palm Beach Police Department. I'm calling about Victor Blackwell. My blood turned to ice. What about him, sir? Are you familiar with Mr. Blackwell's history? Very familiar. Why? We've just arrested him on charges of fraud theft and identity theft. Your daughter Emily was with him at the time of arrest. I felt the room spinning around me. Is Emily okay? Physically, she's fine. Emotionally, she's pretty shaken up. She's asking for you. I was in my car within minutes driving toward Palm Beach faster than I'd ever driven in my life. Detective Johnson had explained the basics. Victor had been running a real estate scam, selling properties he didn't own to wealthy tourists. The authorities had been tracking him for months, and my package of evidence had provided the final pieces they needed to make the arrest. But more importantly, during their extended honeymoon, Emily had started to see cracks in Victor's perfect facade. She called us this morning. Detective Johnson had said she'd found some disturbing things in her husband's laptop and wanted to report suspicious activity. I found Emily at the police station sitting in a witness room with red-rimmed eyes and the shell-shocked expression of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. When she saw me, she broke down completely. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," she sobbed, using the name she hadn't called me in years. "You were right about everything." I held her while she cried, feeling every tear as if it were my own. For the first time in months, my daughter was really present. Not the manipulated puppet Victor had been controlling, but the real Emily I'd raised and loved. "Tell me what happened," I said gently. Emily wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. Yesterday morning, Victor got a phone call. He thought I was in the shower, but I could hear him talking to someone about closing the deal and getting access to the old man's accounts. The old man, me. I started paying attention to his conversations after that. And then I found his laptop open while he was on the beach. "Dad, he had files on me on you, on our family's financial information, photos of our house, property records, even articles about your business success. What else? Pictures of other women. Lots of them. And not just recent photos. These went back months. Some from before we even met. He was seeing other people the entire time we were dating. I wasn't surprised, but I let her continue. But the worst part was a folder labeled Emily Project. It had a timeline of our relationship notes about my personality. Strategies for isolating me from you, Dad. Our entire romance was planned. Every spontaneous date, every coincidental meeting, he'd written it all down like a business plan. The Emily Project, even the name made me sick. There was something else, Emily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. A document called Inheritance Timeline. It had information about your will, your properties, your investments. Things I'd never told him. Things I didn't even know myself. How could he have gotten that information? I don't know. But Dad, there were notes about making sure I was properly positioned when you died. He was planning for your death. The implications hit me like a freight train. Victor hadn't just been planning to steal from Emily. He'd been planning to ensure I died sooner rather than later, positioning himself to inherit everything through my daughter. That's when I called the police, Emily said. I was scared, confused, but I knew I had to report what I'd found. And then they told me about the real estate fraud and the other charges. And oh God, Dad, what if you hadn't sent that package? What if I'd never found out? I held her tighter, thinking about Elizabeth Blackwell and her convenient car accident. Detective Johnson joined us an hour later with an update that made my blood run cold. We searched Mr. Blackwell's hotel room and found some interesting items, she said, including a vial of potassium chloride and several syringes. What's potassium chloride? Emily asked. It's a drug that can cause cardiac arrest, I said quietly, remembering my research into Elizabeth's death. It's almost impossible to detect in an autopsy unless you're specifically looking for it. Emily went pale. You think he was going to— We think Mr. Blackwell was preparing for multiple contingencies, Detective Johnson said diplomatically. The good news is that we stopped him before he could implement any of his plans. We spent the rest of the day giving statements to the police and authorities' agents. The scope of Victor's crimes was staggering. He'd been running similar scams in multiple states, targeting wealthy women and their families. The evidence I'd compiled had been crucial in establishing the pattern of behavior that prosecutors needed for a federal case. But the personal revelations were even more devastating than the criminal charges. He never loved me at all, did he? Emily asked as we sat in my hotel room that evening. No, sweetheart. I don't think he's capable of love. How did I not see it? How was I so blind? I thought about my conversation with Dr. Lopez about the difference between being supportive and being an enabler. Emily, I need to apologize to you. I think I made you vulnerable to someone like Victor. She frowned. What do you mean I spent your whole life protecting you from consequences, fixing your problems, making sure you never had to face real hardship? I thought I was showing love, but I never taught you how to recognize danger or handle difficult situations on your own. Dad, you were a wonderful father. I was an overprotective father. There's a difference. I created a world where you never had to question anyone's motives or protect yourself from manipulation, because I was always there to handle everything. Emily was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd said, but you tried to warn me about Victor. After it was almost too late. If I'd raised you differently, if I'd taught you to be more skeptical, more self-reliant, you might have seen through him before you married him. Or maybe he's just really good at what he does. That was true too. Victor was a professional predator who'd perfected his techniques over years of practice. Even a more experienced woman might have fallen for his manipulation. The important thing is that you're safe now, I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Victor was in jail, but the damage he'd done to Emily's sense of reality, her ability to trust her own judgment, her relationship with me, all of that would take time to heal. That night, as Emily slept in the hotel room's second bed, I got a call from Robert. Thomas, there's something you need to know. Victor made bail. I felt my heart stop. How is that possible? His lawyer argued that he wasn't a flight risk because of his marriage to Emily. The judge set bail at $1.5 million and someone paid it. Who, we don't know yet. But Thomas, if Victor is out, you and Emily could be in danger. He knows you're the reason he got arrested. I looked at Emily sleeping peacefully for the first time in months and felt a familiar surge of protective rage. Victor had destroyed her emotionally, financially manipulated her, and possibly planned to murder both of us. And now he was free to finish what he'd started. Robert, I need you to arrange security for Emily, and I want that Orlando house watched 24 hours a day. What about you? I walked to the hotel window and looked out at the dark parking lot, wondering if Victor was already out there somewhere planning his revenge. I can take care of myself. But as I hung up the phone, I realized that this nightmare was far from over. Victor Blackwell was free, furious, and desperate predators are the most dangerous kind. Emily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something I couldn't make out. I moved closer to her bed, ready to wake her if she was having a nightmare. Instead, she was smiling slightly, and I heard her whisper, "Thank you, Daddy." And for the first time in months, my daughter felt safe enough to sleep peacefully. And I was going to make sure she stayed that way no matter what it cost me. 2 months later, I was sitting in my garden when Emily brought me the newspaper. "Dad, you need to see this." The headline made me smile. Convicted fraudster Victor Blackwell sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The article detailed his conviction on multiple counts of fraud theft, identity theft, and conspiracy. The prosecution had used my evidence package as the foundation of their case, and testimony from Sarah Lisa Maria and Elizabeth's sister had painted a devastating picture of his predatory behavior. But the most satisfying part was the final paragraph. Blackwell's assets, including several luxury vehicles and properties acquired through fraudulent means, will be liquidated to provide restitution to his victims. 12 years, Emily said, sitting beside me on the garden bench. It seems like a lot, but also not enough. It's enough, I said. He'll be 70 when he gets out, too old to start over with the same schemes. Emily nodded, but I could see something was still bothering her. What is it, sweetheart? I keep wondering about the other women he was seeing while we were dating. The authorities said there were at least 3 others he was manipulating at the same time. I'd wondered about that too. Did they find them 2 of them? They're both pressing charges, but the third one. Emily's voice trailed off. Dad, she was 17, barely older than I was when Mom left. The thought of Victor targeting a teenager made my stomach turn, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected all along. He was escalating, getting bolder, targeting younger and more vulnerable victims. The important thing is that he can't hurt anyone else now because of you, Emily said quietly. Dad, if you hadn't investigated him, if you hadn't sent that package, you would have figured it out eventually. Would I was so completely under his control. I believed everything he told me about you, about our relationship. I was ready to cut you out of my life forever. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the roses bloom. These were the same roses Emily had helped me plant when she was 12, the ones she'd complained about but secretly been proud of. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you give up on me when I was so horrible to you, when I chose Victor over you, when I demanded the Orlando house keys? Why didn't you just wash your hands of me? I thought about that for a long moment. The honest answer was that I'd come close to giving up several times. There were nights when I'd wondered if Emily was too far gone, too thoroughly manipulated to save. Because you're my daughter, I said finally. Not the daughter Victor tried to turn you into, but the real Emily. The one who used to help me in this garden and fall asleep on my lap during movie nights. That girl was still in there somewhere, and I wasn't going to abandon her. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to make up for what I did to you. You don't need to make up for anything. You were being manipulated by a professional predator. None of his actions were your fault, but the things I said to you were things he taught you to say. Emily, I've spent the last 2 months learning about psychological manipulation and abuse. What Victor did to you is called trauma bonding and gaslighting. He systematically destroyed your ability to trust your own perceptions and replace them with his version of reality. It feels so stupid now. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs I ignored. That's what makes predators like Victor so dangerous. They're experts at exploiting normal human psychology, wanting to be loved, wanting to belong, wanting to please your partner. Those aren't character flaws. They're normal human needs that he weaponized against you. Emily wiped her eyes and leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when she was little. So what happens now? She asked. Now you heal, we heal, and we figure out how to have a healthier relationship going forward. What do you mean I'd been thinking about this for weeks preparing for this conversation? Emily, I made mistakes in how I raised you. I was so afraid of you being hurt or disappointed that I protected you from everything, including the normal consequences that teach people how to navigate the world safely. Dad, you were a great father. I was a loving father, but I wasn't always a wise one. I should have taught you how to recognize manipulation, how to set boundaries, how to trust your own instincts. Instead, I just fixed everything for you. So, what are you saying? I'm saying that going forward, our relationship needs to be different, more equal. I need to trust you to make your own decisions and handle your own problems. And you need to trust yourself enough to not need my approval for everything. Emily was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd said. Does this mean you're not going to help me anymore? It means I'm going to help you differently. I'll be here when you need advice or support, but I'm not going to solve your problems for you. You're 26 years old, Emily. You're capable of handling your own life. But what if I make mistakes? Then you'll learn from them. That's how people develop good judgment, by making small mistakes and learning from the consequences before they make big ones. I thought about the Orlando house still sitting empty after all these months. Emily had never brought up the keys again after Victor's arrest, and I'd been waiting to see what she'd do. Actually, I said, I have something for you. I pulled a small envelope from my pocket and handed it to her. Inside were the keys to the Orlando house. Emily stared at them in shock. Dad, I can't accept these. Not after everything that happened. The house is yours, Emily. It always was going to be yours, but now you're getting it as a gift from someone who trusts you to use it wisely, not as something you're entitled to take. What's the difference? The difference is that you understand its value now. You understand that it represents years of hard work and sacrifice, not just a convenient vacation spot. Emily held the keys in her palm, and I could see her processing the weight of what they represented. I want to earn this, she said finally. What do you mean I want to pay you rent for the house? Not market rate, but something fair. I want to contribute to the maintenance and upkeep. I don't want to just inherit it. I want to deserve it. I smiled, recognizing the daughter I'd raised beneath the woman Victor had tried to destroy. That sounds reasonable. Over the following months, I watched Emily slowly rebuild her sense of self. She started therapy to process the trauma of her marriage to Victor. She got a job at a nonprofit organization, insisting on earning her own way rather than relying on my financial support. She made new friends, carefully chosen people who appreciated her for who she was, rather than what she could give them. The transformation was remarkable. The entitled, demanding young woman who'd called me 2 months after Victor's arrest to demand the Orlando house keys was gone, replaced by someone thoughtful, independent, and genuinely kind. She also started dating again eventually, but this time she introduced me to her boyfriends early in the relationship. She asked for my opinion and actually listened to my concerns. More importantly, she trusted her own instincts and ended relationships when something didn't feel right. I'm not looking for someone to complete me, she told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen. I'm looking for someone to complement the person I already am. It was exactly what I'd hoped she'd learn. 2 years after Victor's conviction, Emily and I took a trip to Orlando together. It was the first time either of us had been back to the house since before her marriage. It feels different, she said as we walked through the rooms that held so many memories. How so? Before I saw it as something I was entitled to inherit. Now I see it as something you worked hard to give me. The responsibility feels different. We spent the weekend cleaning out old memories and making new ones. Emily had decided to use the house as a vacation rental, donating the profits to organizations that helped victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. It seems fitting, she said, using Victor's intended prize to help other people he might have hurt. On our last evening there, we sat on the deck watching the sunset. The same deck where I'd imagined spending my retirement with future grandchildren. Dad, do you ever regret not giving Victor the keys when he first asked? Never, do you? Emily shook her head. If you'd given them to him, he would have used this place as his base of operations for whatever he was planning next. Other women would have been hurt, and you might not be here to watch this sunset with me. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange and pink, reflecting off the water like a painting. Dad, yes, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for finding your way back. The next morning, as we prepared to fly home, Emily handed me an envelope. What's this rent for the Orlando house for the weekend we just spent here? I started to protest, but she held up her hand. Dad, you taught me that everything has value, that nothing worthwhile is free. This house has value, and I want to pay my fair share for using it. Inside the envelope was a check for $400 and a note for the man who taught me the difference between entitlement and gratitude. I love you, Dad. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone I was genuinely proud to call family. Not because she was perfect, but because she'd learned to take responsibility for her mistakes and grow from them. 4 years have passed since Victor's arrest. Emily is now 31, married to a kind man named Michael, who she met through her work at the nonprofit. He's a social worker, someone who shares her passion for helping people rather than exploiting them. They have a small wedding planned for next fall, and this time I'm walking her down the aisle. Victor, according to the last prison records I checked, is serving his sentence at a federal facility in Ohio. He'll be eligible for parole in 7 years when he's 63. I have no doubt that when he gets out, he'll try to start over with the same schemes. But he'll be older, less attractive to potential victims, and he'll have a criminal record that makes him easier to investigate. More importantly, his primary targets, Emily and myself, are no longer vulnerable. Emily has learned to recognize manipulation and trust her own instincts, and I've learned to trust her to protect herself. The Orlando house has become exactly what I'd originally envisioned, a place where family gathers to make memories. Emily and Michael use it for vacations, and I visit several times a year. We're planning to spend Christmas there this year along with Michael's parents and siblings. Sometimes late at night, I think about what might have happened if I hadn't sent that package to Victor. If I'd simply refused to give him the keys and let him work on Emily gradually, patiently, the way he had with his other victims, I think he would have succeeded eventually. Emily would have signed over power of attorney, given him access to our family's assets, isolated herself completely from me, and then when he'd taken everything he wanted, I probably would have died in some convenient accident, just like Elizabeth Blackwell. But instead, Victor is in prison. Emily is happy and healthy, and I get to be the grandfather I always dreamed of being when their first child is born this year. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or public. Sometimes it's simply living well surrounded by people who love you for who you really are, rather than what you can give them. And sometimes the greatest victory is not losing the person you love most to someone who never deserved them in the first place. As I write this, I can hear Emily and Michael laughing in my kitchen as they prepare dinner. She's teaching him to make my mother's recipe for pot roast. The same recipe I taught her when she decided she wanted to learn to cook for herself rather than relying on restaurants and takeout. The sound of her genuine laughter, free from manipulation and fear, is the sweetest revenge I could ever imagine. Victor Blackwell stole 3 months of my daughter's life, but he failed to steal her future, her capacity for love, or her relationship with me. In the end, that failure was his complete destruction and our complete victory. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.